The doctors examined me and told me, yeah, you're going to have a baby today. And then they listened for her heartbeat. And in that moment, in full labor, I was alone. I learned that my first child had suddenly and inexplicably passed away. The closest analogy I can use is you take a bottle and you drop it from a 5th-story window. What does it look like when it falls? That was what my soul looked like. I lost everything that day.
All in one day, in one 24-hour period.
In one 24-hour period, I lost everything. I had to rebuild who I was, the core of my being, from the ground up. And let's not even get into the sense of guilt and shame. I mean, society does not tell you that it's not your fault. Nobody. I had to become this enormous learner. I had to learn everything new. I had to learn how to do life in a completely new way. I had to learn how to have a new brain.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast. I'm very excited today to have with us Melissa Saleh, who is a force of nature and also an AI entrepreneur and trauma survivor. And she now writes and speaks on trauma transcendence. Melissa, I'm really excited to have you on the Life in Transition podcast. Most welcome.
Thank you, Art. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So jumping in, what would you consider for yourself to be one of the most meaningful or important transitions that you have been through?
Well, my life has, for lack of a better word, an AD and a BC. There is before the event, and then there's after. And everything in my life that happened before is very different than everything that happened after. And the event for me was August 15th, 2014. I was almost 9 months pregnant with my first child. I had suffered several miscarriages. I had fought to have a healthy pregnancy. And here I was finally at the finish line. I went into labor in my apartment in Brooklyn. I labored throughout the night with my little labor timer, waiting for the contractions to reach a certain level where I was instructed to go to the hospital. I went to the hospital the next morning. The doctors examined me and told me, yeah, you're going to have a baby today. And then they listened for her heartbeat. And in that moment, in full labor, I was alone. I learned that my first child had suddenly and inexplicably passed away. And there was no explanation, there was no warning, and there was no opportunity to do anything about it. It had happened. It was done. I couldn't say goodbye. And I was also told, you must continue with labor and you must deliver your baby or your life could be in danger too. That event shattered who I was down to my core. The closest analogy I can use is you take a bottle and you drop it from a 5th-story window. What does it look like when it falls? That was what my soul looked like after I got that news. Throughout the span of that day, the losses mounted. I realized through the course of the day that my marriage was over. I also realized through the course of the day that my beloved home city of New York City could no longer be my beloved home city. The details of that are all described in my book, but I lost everything that day.
All in one day, in one 24-hour period.
In one 24-hour period, I lost everything. There is my life before that happened, and then there is my life after. And my life for the last 10 and a half years has been a series of steps, often baby steps, and then sometimes larger steps, in figuring out, first, I had to go to zero. I was an entrepreneur at that time. I had my own content strategy company. I had a writing career. I had a marriage. I had a life in New York City. I had friends and professional contacts and all of the trappings of a modern life. It went to zero. My life in New York just systematically fell down around me. I had to shut down my company. I lost my marriage. I lost most of my friends. I ended up giving away most of my possessions on a Brooklyn stoop and just going to zero. I drove out of New York after almost 15 years of living there in a beat up old Volvo sedan at 6 a.m. And I rolled down the window as I drove over the Verrazano Bridge, and I gave the 5 boroughs the finger for all that pain and trauma. Not New York's fault, but it was New York was my personal ground zero for all of this. And I left the city, and I left my life. And I then had to start over from scratch at the age of 38 and systematically over the next 10 years, put my life back together piece by piece, rebuild. And starting with rebuilding self, I had to rebuild who I was, the core of my being from the ground up.
You said several times that I had to leave this behind. I had to leave my marriage. I had to leave New York City. What was it that gave you that sense of knowing inside that you had to do this? Because there's, some things happen to you for sure, like losing your daughter. That's your child. I think it was daughter, you said.
It was a girl, yeah.
And I cannot imagine what that's like by itself, but then all the other pieces in the same day.
Yeah.
What was the feeling of like, I had to do this?
Well, without going into too many details, look, I've written a book, and the whole first section of the book, it opens with me on my way to the hospital, and it takes you through that day. So if you want to know all the details of that day, you could read about it in the opening of the book.
What's the name of your book, Melissa?
Well, it's still in process. The book the book is still being written. I will reveal everything when the time is right.
Right.
But let's just say that it was undeniable that the marriage would end after that day, and that my time in New York City would end after that day. It was just a matter of when. It took me another 2 years to fully exit the marriage, or for the marriage to fall to the ground enough to be done.
Okay.
And
but you had the awareness that day that this
something
was inevitable.
On that day that made it inevitable. Yeah. Yes. Again, I'll save it for the book, but something happened that day that made the end of the marriage absolutely inevitable.
Right.
Same with New York City. There were betrayals that were so, and when I say betrayals, they were experienced by me as betrayals.
Sure.
When you look at the events,
but that's what counts.
Well, yes. When you look at the events of that day, there are many different ways to tell the story. There's a Rashomon effect of different people have different narratives. But the simple fact is that I am the one who actually went through the trauma. I am the one who experienced it. So, anyone else's recounting of that day, well, they're entitled to it. But from my standpoint, no, it was my daughter. It was my trauma. I went through it. And so I had to then have the worst of the grief, the trauma, the PTSD, the loss. And then I had to do the most work to come out of it, to transition into an entirely new version of myself and a completely new life. And may I say, the life I lead now is exactly the life I wanted to lead then. I'm not a different person. And this is not a completely new life. I did not move to Idaho to become a farmer. I am fulfilling all of the goals and dreams that I had back then. It's just I'm doing it as a much stronger and more empowered version of myself. And I'm doing it in a different place with people that I might not have let in back then. So the transition and the transcendence were so necessary to enable me to move into this new life. And I do have healthy children now. Which no member of Western medicine, no physician ever said that was going to be a possibility. I had these babies in my early 40s with no fertility assistance whatsoever, completely naturally during the pandemic. Nobody in Western medicine after August 15, 2014 said that was possible. But when you transcend your trauma, things that were supposedly impossible become possible. And I have 2 daughters. They are healthy. They are marvels. They are incredible. And they were considered miracles because nobody thought that would happen.
So what is it that makes it possible? You say when you transcend your trauma, then the impossible becomes possible. what is it that makes that possible?
Well, transcending your trauma requires becoming a completely new version of yourself. It requires doing, there's a lot now about reprogramming our brains. There's a lot more
Mm,
discussion about it and talk about it. You have to do brain surgery on yourself almost every day when you are transcending trauma, because trauma, as I'm sure, it invades your nervous system. It invades your whole physiological self. It's sitting there in your spine. It's sitting there in your
yeah,
brain.
it's right there in the
And
amygdala, right?
well, yeah, exactly. And if you are not actively doing the work to shed that trauma, to overcome it, to transcend it, and it may always be there. Look, no one will ever change the fact that I lost my daughter on that day. I will be a woman who lost a child my entire life. I will be a woman who grieves a child my entire life. You don't transcend the love and you don't transcend the grief. What you transcend is the trauma. And the trauma was stopping me from anything resembling a meaningful life. I could barely, if someone touched me, I would jump out of my skin. I had PTSD when I was living in Manhattan. I couldn't ride the subway because
Mm,
it would overwhelm me to the level of I would need medication. I couldn't hear a baby cry for several years. My life was so restricted and constricted. There's a line. I'm someone that I memorize. Somehow my brain just memorizes song lyrics. When I hear a song, I just know the song. I don't know why. It's always been like that. And there's a line that was always running through my head during that time from Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical Evita. And there's a song where this woman sings, "Every time it matters, all my words desert me, and anyone can hurt me, and they do." And that's what your life is like when you've just lost a baby at birth and you have PTSD. Anyone can hurt you, and they do. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean they mean
right.
to hurt you. But anyone, the second you walk out your door, or even when you don't walk out your door, someone can send you something on Facebook. They can send you a text, and it will hurt you so badly that you're kind of done for the day. Maybe longer. I had to shut down Christmas cards. I couldn't handle getting holiday cards because what are holiday cards, especially for me during that time? My entire peer group was having babies.
Right.
Um, it was, my life had to go to zero in order to heal. There really wasn't another option, not for me. And it was so undeniable. I simply couldn't function until I worked through, at least started working through the trauma.
So when you say you had to go to zero, and I love the visual you gave for the bottle dropping from the fifth floor. You get it. I mean, that's pretty small shards or even like powder, right? But what what did that feel like? I mean, a lot of people talk about, their dark night of the soul, or if you have something you need to address it, you often don't until you hit rock bottom. But what
Mm-hmm.
was that? I mean, you left your whole community,
Mm-hmm.
right, at that point. So what was that like? Did you feel at that point also completely alone, or did you have people in your life that still supported you through that transition?
I was completely alone. I had a couple of friends who I have two friends that have been my friends since kindergarten. And when you are going through something like that, there's that phrase, you're going to learn who your real friends are. I mean, you are going to learn who your real friends are. And these two women, not the problem with it, there are 1,000 unbelievably hard things about a loss like this.
Yeah.
One of the unbelievably hard things is that people are afraid of it. Nobody understands it. Nobody knows why it happens. It's the absolute worst case scenario, worst nightmare for every parent. And in our society, nobody wants to talk about it. It's very taboo. Um, Nobody wanted to talk about the woman grieving her dead baby. Excuse me for saying it, but it's true.
Yeah.
Except for the two oldest friends who were like, we will get in this horrible, dark place with you. And I couldn't ask them to be there with me all the time. That's too much to ask of somebody.
Right.
They were, I mean, I'll put it to you this way. One of those friends, she drove to the funeral home under the BQE to pick up my daughter's ashes because someone had to do it. And the funeral director came to the front door in tears to hand her that box. She did that for me because she knew that if I was the one there, it would have been so horrific for me. So she took it for the team. She did that for me. Every single person is so horrified by this, and it just seeing their horror amplifies it for you, like, because you are living with your own horror. And let's not even get into the sense of guilt and shame. I mean, society does not tell you that it's not your fault. Nobody, almost nobody, except for one nurse that day ever said to me, it's not your fault.
Really? Like even all the healthcare professionals and everything?
Doctors are immediately concerned with their own liability. At least my doctors were. They were concerned with their own liability.
And that came across in the feelings that you had, like the sense that you had in the situation at the point?
No, it came across in what they said to me on the day. At one point, my OB, I'm inconsolable. I'm screaming, I'm crying. And he looks at me and he goes, this is hard for me too.
What the?
There's a phrase in Judaism, I'm Jewish. There's a phrase in Judaism called Kol Yisrael. And it's an abbreviation for a longer phrase that basically means Jews got to look out for each other. We got to look out for tribe. He was a Jewish doctor. Kol Yisrael, motherfucker. Like, I mean, maybe he and I will have a sit down one day. Yeah, it was bad.
I mean, everybody's in their own place, but that's pretty tough.
It was bad. I looked at him and I wanted to scream in his face. You're having a bad day at work, and you're going to go home and you're going to call your lawyers to paper this up so you can avoid liability. I'm losing my first child. Right. So let's get a little perspective here.
Right. Yeah, to compare that is unbelievable, and especially someone that's in that space all the time. I mean, that you would.
Yeah, one would think he's supposed to be one of the highest rated, high risk OBs in Manhattan.
Right.
Yeah.
What was the process like to start to rebuild? When did you know you were at bottom? Was it right then during that day?
No, it took me 2 more years to know I was at bottom. When I knew I was at bottom was when I lost my next pregnancy. Because I felt, after losing that baby, I felt the only thing that would even remotely heal me, that would even give me any possibility of having a life worth living, would be having another baby. And in some ways, I wasn't wrong, but in many, many ways, I was vastly oversimplifying.
Yeah, well, anytime we lock ourselves into having only one possibility of redemption, makes it less likely that we can live in a redeemed life. Right.
Exactly. You're exactly right. But if you had told me that back then, I would have punched you in the face. Yeah. I just wasn't able to hear that back then.
For sure.
And my 2 closest friends.
So you got pregnant again?
I did. And my 2 closest friends at that time were women from a stillbirth support group that I attended who were in very similar situations to me. And they both got pregnant again pretty quickly. And that was devastating for me too. Then I finally, a year and a half after the loss, I got pregnant again. And I just knew this time, my daughter who passed had been genetically perfect. She had been otherwise healthy at birth, except for the fact that her heart had inexplicably stopped. Yeah, they never found a reason. What Western medicine does not know is extremely vast.
Oh yes, for sure. Yeah,
I got pregnant.
Pretty
again.
good at treating physical trauma, but
yeah, exactly. No, not good at treating physical trauma. Good at treating physical injury, but trauma.
Injury. That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, yeah.
I got pregnant again a little less than a year and a half after the loss. And I just knew something is off. Something is not right. And I get to the second trimester screening, and my new doctors informed me even less kindly than my first doctors. The genetic screening has come back. This baby has severe genetic abnormalities and will likely not survive birth. So I had to face another horrific loss. And that happened. I came home, my then husband was gone. He had taken his things and left. And I just went like...
So while you were at this appointment, he had taken his things and left?
No. It wasn't quite as while I was at this appointment. It was a couple weeks later.
Okay.
It made it very... The nicest thing I can say about my first marriage is he made himself very easy to leave. New York City made itself very easy to leave. It just, everything went so to zero that I was like, this is burned to the ground. There is nothing left for me here. So pick up and leave. There's not going to be any regret. Je ne regrette rien, because there is nothing here for me. It has made itself easy to leave, which is a blessing, because there was Sun Tzu, burn your bridges. There was nowhere to go but forward. There was nowhere to go.
So that's clear. It's clear from the marriage that it's that way. How was it? Was it as equally clear for you from your business and from your family and community in New York? Was it as equally clear at that time?
Yeah. I mean, they had pretty much gone to zero too. Like, nobody was in this with me. Nobody was like really wanted to truly be in this. Nobody.
I can't imagine what that's like. I mean, I can't imagine. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to go through
that. Thank you. That being said, the woman you see here today, like, I can handle just about anything.
Yeah.
Bring it. I mean, don't bring it, but you want to bring me a situation, like, okay, I've seen worse.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've seen, I know that's not chest, but you've seen pretty tough for sure. What is, besides that sense of resilience and agency that you have now, what's other things that you have learned through this process? I mean, that was the start at the tipping point. What's a big takeaway or learning that you've had through this process?
I mean, where shall I start? That's what the book is about. The book is about, again, like I like to say, I'm not a different person now. I have the tools and the knowledge to actually be me. And I didn't have that. I had one of the best educations that this country offers. My parents, I had an interesting upbringing, but one thing that my mother always advocated for, that I'm very grateful to her for, is look, we're going to figure out how to pay for private education, and you're going to get a great education. And I grew up in DC. I went to a top all-girls private school. I went to an Ivy League college. I went to a top 10 law school. I had this incredible education, and I'm very grateful for it. That being said, not a single thing that I learned in that incredible education helped me over the last 10 years. I had to get a completely new education in everything that is not addressed in our very Western canon educational system.
Right. I mean, I think there's some liberal arts schools that do a little bit in that line,
but in a very, I took like the Bible as literature, and I took a lot of, like the only thing useful that I did in college was read Shakespeare, because that teaches you more about the human condition and the patterns of life on this earth, and how to read people and how to understand people and their motivations than anything else. It just does. I had to become this enormous learner. I had to learn everything new. I had to learn how to do life in a completely new way. I had to learn how to have a new brain, because everything in my brain was so awful and self-defeating. I blamed myself for the loss. I beat myself up over everything that happened afterwards. I had no context for how to think about what had happened, how to make sense of it. No one else that I knew, well, with the exception of one person from my high school, had a loss like this. What did that say about me? I also, I had to unlearn everything I thought I knew about I thought I was pretty good in relationships. Clearly not. Your results are what to look at, not how you think you're doing, but what results are you getting? And the results of my first marriage were not good. So I had to become, I don't want to say ruthless, because I have to be ruthlessly kind to myself. Relentless, I guess, is the word. Relentlessly kind to myself, and relentlessly counter culture. Relentlessly, culture tells you to go do this sort of thing. Absolutely not. That doesn't work for me. I don't do that. And I don't care how much society thinks I should, or whether other people judge me for not, that sort of thing. Like, I had to also become incredibly comfortable with just myself and my own silence and my own company. I have to live with myself every single day. Everyone else, I got to leave. Everyone else who had hurt me, I got to say, like, peace out. And some of those people I have reconnected with, now down the line, and we're good. This is not a j'accuse. This is not, blame anybody, but I needed what I needed, and I needed to separate myself from many environments, many people.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by MidLife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes, you've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do, but you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. MidLife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition, and we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community. How did you know that you needed to do that? Because it's clear, and now you've designed it and you have grown the life that you want to have, which is wonderful. How did you know that that was the path to cut all these ties and to delve deeply into yourself?
I didn't. I just had to make the pain stop. And everybody hurt me so badly, literally.
Okay.
And they didn't mean to, most of them anyway. Some of them did.
Right.
And this is not an evil people thing, but this is
I get it.
I can't hear about your new baby. I can't participate in your joy. I can't be a part of your life. That is not an option for me. And even hearing about it is so painful for me that I have no other option. So I had to make the pain stop.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I get it now. When did you feel yourself starting to step up from the bottom?
When I made it to Charleston. Charleston, South Carolina is a really incredible place. On the one hand, it has this enormous duality, as every U.S. city does. Every U.S. city has the beauty and the horror. Charleston, South Carolina is the home front of the American slave trade. That is where the slave ships docked to march people off boats and sell them. That is a horrific history. That market is still there. It's been sanitized into a tourist attraction, but it is still there. It is also an unbelievably beautiful, spiritually enriching, enlivening place. There's this incredible food culture around a deep love and understanding of creating incredible food through, heritage seed cultivation. And I met a woman who raises all of the pigs that the top restaurant purveyors want to buy. And she has made an art out of raising these pigs. And her whole view on eating meat is only eat meat that's had one bad day. And things like that were just so different than anything that I had ever encountered in my, Ivy League and law school in Manhattan and New York media writer life. Go, and achieve, and status and all the rest. This was such a different way of looking at life. Also, there's a deep relationship with the dead in Charleston. People may have read Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. It's about Savannah, which is a little further south of Charleston. But there is a spirituality of the culture. And the city, it's still shaped a little like a mini Manhattan. It's kind of a peninsula, and you can walk the whole city. And I was alone in this house that was supposed to be the house for my husband and our miracle second baby. But I was alone. And at night, that loneliness was so crushing and the loss was so intense that I would just walk. I would walk the streets of Charleston. And I found myself, the moment I knew that I was coming out of rock bottom, I found myself near a graveyard in the French Quarter. And I saw some tourists with cameras and they were taking pictures outside of this graveyard. And I'm like, it's a little strange at night. I bet this is a ghost thing because Charleston has all the ghost tours. So I asked them and they're like, oh yeah, it's the woman with the baby. And I was like, what? So I raced home and got on Google. This woman in 1888 named Sue Hardy had a baby who died at birth. She died 6 days later. They are both buried in that cemetery. And on the anniversary of the baby's death, it is said that Sue's ghost appears to visit her newborn child. This is on the internet. Pictures of her. I don't know if they're fake or not. The pictures, I have no idea.
Right.
This is all on the internet. That moment, I just kind of knew, you can't make this up. I'm here for a reason. I found my people. I'm not alone in this experience. My grief is okay. And that grief deserves to be honored. And this loss is a real loss. And because I had to even fight to have it acknowledged that she existed. It's not even a real loss. She didn't take a breath outside the womb. Excuse me?
So
I had to have a funeral. Like, I had to have a funeral service. There was an autopsy. I mean, it's so, there was such a desire to invalidate. Whereas, another type of loss, other people knew the person, they knew the child, they knew whomever. And so people can gather to grieve with you, to mourn with you. Nobody knew her but me. Nobody grieved her but me. Nobody. Maybe, the rest of the family, but no, I was her mother. I am her mother.
Yeah.
So that was such a powerful moment for me, because I realized this has been happening in America for centuries. Just because people don't talk about it and they want to deny it and they want to invalidate me does not mean that the grief isn't valid and that it didn't happen. And this woman, whether it's true or not, whether she's a real ghost or not, I don't care.
Yeah.
That was meaningful to me. And I knew in that moment, like, all right, there's going to be a journey here. And I guess I'm up for it. I don't have any other option. I have nothing else to do, so I guess I'm up for this journey,
Yeah. So one thing is that you didn't feel as alone, which is very comforting.
I felt less alone. They're dead, but they're
but also,
I could go visit them.
You could have something that reminds you of it that doesn't trigger you into complete destruction again.
Exactly.
Or dissolution or whatever, right? The shards, and not even shards, the dust of a 5-story dropped bottle.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the starting of climbing out. And then how did you rebuild yourself from there? Like, if you start, you came all the way to nothing from, on the surface, a perfect life until you lost your first daughter.
Yeah.
And then went to zero. And how did you decide, or as Ram Dass says, you became nobody, not by choice, but that's what happened.
Nobody. I was nobody. I'm in a city where nobody knows me. Let's just say the phone wasn't ringing. I left New York. I was there almost 15 years. I don't think a single person called to be like, did you leave New York? I don't think a single person called. Just didn't care.
Yeah, that comes back to what you said about learning who your friends are and who your friends aren't.
Well, apparently I had a lot of non-friends. It's okay. I have incredible people now. And I did have those two incredible friends who are basically sisters. And they're with me for life. And I can't imagine having gone through this without them. And I did have other people as well. The two friends from Stillbirth Support Group, they are absolutely extraordinary women, and we are still very good friends. And we went on to have 2 healthy children each. And those women, when you want to talk about people give me nice compliments. Sometimes they say, "Oh, you're strong." And I say, I got you. You ain't seen nothing. Let me introduce you to these 2 women. There were extraordinary people. What was my next step in Charleston? I ate. My body was like ash. I had been feeding myself for survival for 2 years. I hadn't, my body, my soul, everything was it was flat. It was ash. So I just would take myself to these restaurants around my house in Charleston, and I would sit down at the bar, and people, usually a large man with a big beard or something, because the chefs in Charleston are such characters, would come over and they'd be like, "Hey, darling, like, what you eating?" And I'd be like, "Cook me something. Cook me what you do best." And they would cook me something incredible. And I would eat it, and it would it would bring life and energy back into my cells. And then walking in this very beautiful environment and being around such a alive place. Charleston is alive. The bugs, the animals, you find an alligator that's like climbed up your porch. the palmetto bugs, it's alive. And I let that kind of re-infuse me with life. And then I go to the beach, walk in the sand, and lie in the water, the soft Atlantic. And it's not like here in LA with the Pacific Ocean. It's that soft
when it's
Atlantic
cold,
coast. And watching pelicans sort of laze above and seeing dolphins and just reconnecting with the natural world around me, and giving myself the space to do that. And then in a sort of under the Tuscan sun kind of move, I took the last of my money. I had no idea where money was going to come from ever again, but I took the last of my money and I started rehabbing the house. And that gave me a purpose. It gave me a project, and it gave me a place to put love. Like, this was my house.
Right.
I owned it. It was the last asset that I had. It was the only thing I have left in this world. And that's not nothing.
Right.
I was very privileged to hit rock bottom while owning a house.
Right.
But the house needed work. And so I started putting love into the house.
But if we think about this, like that you started to nourish the different parts of you, right? We all have a body, a mind, an emotional self, a heart, and a soul, a spiritual self. And it's interesting to me when you talked about putting food, like food is such a nourishment, a blessing, or a poison, depending on how we use it and what
Absolutely.
it is.
Just like anything.
And but it has two components. And this is what came out to me when you were talking about, you go to a restaurant and say, cook me what you do best, that you were getting the nourishment of the physical food, but you were also getting the love that person put into it, because this is what they love to do.
What they love to do, and they would look at me and they could tell this woman, I'm there alone. I don't know what, it's obvious. Everyone could tell there was a story to me.
Right.
And that I wasn't okay.
And they were bringing their gift.
Yes.
But what they do, which is cook.
I went to them and it was a little like a religious experience. I went to the temple of this person, this food maker, and I said, heal me, give me what you got. And they did.
It's beautiful. It makes me want to cry.
It was, the chefs, they're all discussed in the book. This is all in the book. I
look forward to reading it when it comes out, but I think I wanted to point that out because I could tell there was more than that. The physical nourishment is also incredibly important, but there was more than that.
Yeah, I wasn't getting takeout. I was going there and I was sitting down and I would look the chef or the person behind, the counter in the face, and they'd see me. And it'd been, in Charleston is a very you go on an off hour. I didn't go to restaurants during peak hours because I didn't want to be, I really couldn't at that time deal with being.
Yeah, you don't want to be traumatized by crowds of loud people, right?
Exactly. So I would go in an off hour. It wouldn't be many people. I'd sit there. And then they got to know me. There was a place called Artisan Meat Share with this amazing chef Bob. And it was a couple blocks from my house. And I would walk there. And he'd just be like, all right, I'm brining today. Sit down. And he'd here's your plate. Hominy Grill. It's one of Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert is from Charleston. It's one of his favorite restaurants. It unfortunately closed, but it was open and around the corner of my house when I was living there. And I'd go there and eat the fried chicken livers. I'd feel like, if my Jewish grandmother didn't really make fried chicken livers, but if she had, I think that's what they would have tasted.
That's what it would have been.
And it just, that kind of food in that kind of environment.
And then letting nature nurture you too, which is so powerful. So powerful. And moving your body, gently moving your body. That's covering.
Moving my body and focusing on beautifying something that mattered to me, which was the house.
Right. So bringing your creativity.
Bringing out its beauty, bringing out what a great house it could be.
Wonderful. I like the reference to the Under the Tuscan Sun too. That's that gives a picture right away. If you were to look back, Melissa, from your perspective now, is there anything you would do differently, or what would you change or not change about this experience? Or tell yourself, what would you tell yourself?
What I would tell myself constantly, it's going to be okay. You are enough. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. There is love for you down the line. It's going to be okay, because that was the hardest part is living in the unknowns. Again, by the time I hit Charleston, I'm 38 years old. I'm like, as a woman, like you get this culture likes to put an expiration date on women. Part of, look, like, I'm not going to lie, part of the benefit of trauma transcendence, I'm 46 years old. I have not had plastic surgery. I have not had any of it. It keeps you young, makes you look good.
Right.
Makes you look like the
Absolutely.
best. It makes you look like the best version of yourself when
Right.
you do this level of trauma work. I didn't look like this 10 years ago. I looked way older. I looked like somebody. I looked rough.
Yeah, and you definitely wouldn't be thinking at that point, being single, that you would have a chance at that age to have
No,
your biological babies again, right?
I'm a divorcee. I've lost my career. I'm a grieving mother. Let's just say I had a lot of demerits again. 38, a lot of demerits against me in the sort of standard dating pool. Like I was a tough sell. Like, let's just put it that way.
So how did you connect with your current husband?
I mean, he's not just my current husband. He's my. It was bashert, but it's also bashert is where in Judaism it means it was meant to happen.
Meant to be, right? Yeah.
My husband and I, it turns out, we almost went to college together. We were at a Model UN conference, the same Model UN conference in New York together in, 8th grade. We went to law school near each other and never met. We worked a block from each other in Manhattan as lawyers and somehow never met. And then he was in the Obama administration. And then after 2016, made his way out to Los Angeles / Silicon Valley to work in AI and to bring his sort of knowledge of financial inclusion and the financial system and match it with emerging technology. I, left law, went into journalism and writing, and then segued into storytelling narratives for startups and companies, and then make it out to Facebook, which is the next section of the book, is all Silicon Valley. I leave Charleston because I get this incredible opportunity to go work with Facebook leadership, Mark Zuckerberg's team, et cetera, because Facebook at that time, it's ironic now, but this was 2016, wanted to tell a kinder, gentler, more empathetic story about the work that Facebook was doing. And so they hired me. They quote unquote outsourced empathy to me. So I get this incredible contract. And I moved sight unseen out to San Francisco, and I started reporting to work in Menlo Park in Silicon Valley. And I suddenly have to become this Silicon Valley person. It's literally like a helicopter drops you in and you have to look around and just, okay, boom. It's, I think of it as, I always loved that movie, Johnny Mnemonic, where, okay, I need to learn something new. And you stick the download in your brain, boom, all right, I got it. And so that's the next section of the book. And then the last section of the book, I wind up in LA, and that's where I met my now husband. I met him even before I moved here. And the whole LA section, I had to go to zero once again. I had to shut down. Facebook contract ended, and I had to go to zero once again to do intensive trauma therapy because I wasn't okay. And once I had no idea how long it was going to take me to do intensive trauma therapy. I thought, okay, I'll shut down my work, et cetera, for a few months. I was dating my husband. His name is Kareem. I was dating him. I didn't have anyone else in LA. I didn't know anybody here, but I had my therapist. She's a non-traditional therapist. And then I had Kareem. And so I was like, all right, and I had my elderly rescue dog. I was like, I think I have enough here to shut down for a while, live on savings, and do this intensive trauma work. Once I got into it, I couldn't leave the little cocoon. That's the thing, is once you're in there, you can't leave the cocoon until you're a butterfly. And you don't know how long it's going to take to be a butterfly. And it took over a year. I had over a year where I saw nobody but those 2 people and 1 dog. And I talked to almost nobody except for those 2 people and 1 dog. That was an unbelievably hard year, but I don't think in fact, I know none of this would have been possible had I not taken that year to do this incredibly deep work.
So that's really important to note. I mean, to me, that's really important to know because in Charleston, you got healthy enough to function in life again.
Yes.
But not healthy enough to have the life you really wanted or were capable of.
That's exactly right. And not healthy enough to have the love I wanted, the marriage I wanted, and have more babies.
Right. So to do that, and I think it's brilliant and perfectly appropriate. You take the step you can, you climb out of the one hole and you function for a while. But here's the thing that I really want to congratulate you on is to recognize that it's worth it to back up again, in a sense, to focus inward again so you can really take your life to the next level. Like not many people would do that. They would sort of go along with what they had, right? Thinking it's good enough.
Well, again, like, thank you, but I think you're giving me too much credit. It's almost like I get, there was a boot, the universe had a boot that just kind of kept kicking me. Like, the work dried up. The Facebook contract ended, and I could already see down the line. Like, my contract with Facebook ended 2 months before the Cambridge Analytica scandal broke. And it was just becoming clear to me, I can tell this story all you want, but if the left hand is doing one thing and the right hand is doing another, it's bogus. Like, then
you're
your
wasting
story
my
is just
time and your money.
Exactly. And it's inauthentic. And that's not what I want from my career at this stage.
Right.
So then I get to LA, and honestly, I was too messed up to work. I really was. It wasn't an option. It wasn't a nice to have. It was a must have. And the pressure and stress and re-traumatization of dating again and falling in love. It's the love of my life. He's my life partner. But that didn't change the fact that my nervous system was programmed for a horrific first marriage with an alcoholic. Yeah. And any kind of physical affection. I had PTSD. So I had no choice. It was that, they say do or die. Like, it was, I really didn't have, it's not like I was like, I'm going to walk away from all these fantastic opportunities. It was like this, there are no opportunities unless I do this. Right. Because this could all go to zero again.
Yeah. And it seems probably at the time, in a way, horrible that that's the case. But by not leaving you any other choice or not feeling like it, you are also able to come out as a butterfly and have the life that you really want and deserve.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, part of I'm grateful in this journey for the things that make themselves easy to leave, because there isn't regret. There's only, again, it's like the only way through is through. Like, all right, there's no way to go here. There's no.
At some point, you either have to get off the train or be willing to die with the train, literally.
Yeah,
right?
Evolve or die.
It crashes into the wall.
Yeah, exactly. And that's trauma transcendence, is you don't know. Living with the unknowns, that is one of the single biggest tools that you have to learn. You don't know if it's going to turn out. You don't know when. You don't know how. But you get up every day and you do it anyway. And learning intuitive guidance. Look, I like to use the example of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs didn't have a college degree, and it's not like he dropped out of Harvard like, Bill Gates or Zuckerberg. He always said, I wasn't a good student. I didn't like traditional school, but you want to know the education that created Apple? He was trained in intuitive thinking and decision-making and transcendental meditation. He learned how to tap in and make intuitive decisions. That is why we have iPhones. Nobody ever said, I want an iPhone. Yeah. But he intuited. It's kind of like no one told Henry Ford, I want a car. They wanted a better horse and carriage. People wanted better Blackberries. Well, Steve Jobs was able to use very powerful intuitive skills to say, hey, you want to know what people really want that we're going to go build? And that's why we have the iPod and then the iPhone, et cetera. Well, I happen to have excellently trained intuitive skills at this point. Yeah. And I mean, the side benefit, it makes me a very good entrepreneur. You put me in a startup environment, I'm going to be like, the direction is this way. Now you got to go this way. Now you got to go this way. And that's all intuitive training.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life. If you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets. So you say intuitive training, is that something you trained yourself on, or is that something that you had actual training on?
Both. Again, I talk about it in the book. I had a lot of teachers along the way. None of them were fancy pedigreed teachers from my Ivy League education. All of them were people, there is a phrase that I love to use. Religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell. Spirituality is for people who've been there. Spirituality actually has nothing to do with religion. Spirituality is for people who've been in so much pain that the only way to get out of the pain is to embrace the unknown and to embrace what is just not known by modern human civilization. And that's what these people have all done. And the things that they've discovered. And then you turn yourself into A/B testing. You turn yourself into a data point. It's like, all right, this person says that. I'm going to go try it out. And then I would go try it out because what have I got to lose? My life's at zero.
Right.
I would go try it out. And if it worked, I'd be like, this person's onto something. And then I would follow their teachings. I would listen to them. So I would find teachers, and they were incredible.
Nice. No, I think it's, and there's lots of different names for it, right? It's some of my guests will say, oh, it's subconscious. Some of my guests will say it's God, it's the universe, right?
Whatever works for you.
Without thinking that we're in control is a fallacy. I mean, it's, I like what Michael Singer talks about, that, each moment, this moment took 13.8 billion years to get here. And we had about, this much influence, reality, right? Even if we don't want to feel that way. And it is, it's not just when you're in deep trauma. All of life, we don't control. We don't know how it's going to work out. And thinking we do, or trying to make control of it, is a recipe for more stress, right? And running ourselves down.
You're absolutely right. And the other thing, going back to your question of what would I tell myself from back then, the other thing I tell myself from back then is like, let go of your attachment to exactly how it turns out.
To the outcome.
Let go of your attachment. My husband, we're like, look, marriage ain't easy. Any marriage, I would love for someone with a very long marriage to actually give a deeply honest portrayal of that long marriage. It's not easy. You sign up to go on a challenging journey with another person. That being said, the man that I am married to, I wouldn't want to be married to anybody else. I wouldn't want to do this journey with anybody else. I am Jewish. My husband is Arab Muslim. He's Arab American. I don't know, before going through all this trauma work and all this training, if I would have had the strength and the sort of self-composure and the courage of my convictions to go against a lot of people in my family and in my particular culture, to be in a marriage that a lot of people have a lot of opinions about. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Everybody's opinions can kiss my, you know what? Absolutely don't care.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that's
but
how
what a powerful place to get to. What a powerful place to get to when you can be so certain about what's right for you that you don't have to worry about what anybody else says, right? I
just don't care because of what I've been through. At the end of the day, maybe I use it a little too much, but at the end of the day, I'm like, have you been through what I've been through? No? Well, then you can keep your mouth shut.
Right.
If you have and you do it better than me, then sure, tell me all the ways that you did it better than me. But if you haven't, keep your damn mouth shut. Like, I don't care.
Well, I'll give you one thing on the long marriage. Mine's 31 years.
Wow.
Of course, it's a bumpy ride, but there's the two keys that I have. The first thing is work on yourself.
Absolutely. 100%.
The first thing.
If there's ever a problem in the marriage, I always, when I work on myself,
anytime that I'm feeling there's something wrong with my wife, I say, how can I change it, right?
Yeah, it's always me. I know.
And then maybe there's three things. And there's something about, like, once I work on myself, then I get to a place of love, no matter what, right? Like, that love actually wins. It's the same thing. People ask me about kids. I have 3 kids, 2 are adopted. It's been very challenging with some of that. But love always wins, right? And you have to start with loving yourself, right? Then being able to love somebody else. And then the third thing is to keep a really clear and open and honest communication from the very beginning. Like I talk about, my wife and I did these workshops called the Institute for Self-Actualization before we started dating.
Ah, that's smart.
And in there, we got this kind of communication, like where I see like most people's communication is maybe like a gravel road, and ours was like a marble floor. So anytime you got a little speck of dust on it, it would come up before something became big. So we
I
could
love
talk
that
about
analogy.
things and do it in a way that wasn't threatening to each other. And we both grown tremendously. But every time when I started to think that she was the problem, that was the problem with the relationship.
That's always,
Right? And
it's
then I
always
start
me.
looking at myself
I
and what
know.
can I do differently? How can I love better? How can I be more
I
supportive?
know.
How can I get my own ego out of the way? How can I get my resentments out of the way?
Absolutely. And often on our path, something that's going on with him is going on with me too. So stop pointing out that it's going on with him and just go work on it for me.
Yeah. So many of the things that I was, say, resentful or pissed about over the years are things that I was actually jealous of. Like I wanted to be able to give myself permission to rest, to play, right? And when I'd see my wife doing that, I'd be, you know, instead of like, that's what I want. And I'm just resentful because she's holding up a mirror to me to see what I'm not creating for myself. Right?
That's absolutely
and I can tell you, I mean, you'll get there, but 31 years in, it's better than I ever thought possible.
Wow,
31 years
that's
in,
amazing.
right?
That's
It's
amazing.
really,
thank you so much for sharing that. Like that is real wisdom. I appreciate that. The one thing I will say also about love post-trauma, you want to make sure that you don't trauma bond. I know this is a term, but it's a term, but it's also a truth. Like,
yes,
you want to make sure it doesn't, just because you're trauma bonded doesn't mean you don't love each other. It's not that it's a fake love, but if there are trauma bonds, it means there is codependence. Like you are relying on them for something because it's too painful for you. And it's okay post-trauma and then you fall in love to have some trauma bonds. It's going to happen, but you do have to
stay there.
Can't stay there. You'd have to focus on them and work on them and be like, oh boy, I'm trauma bonding to my husband around this thing about going out into the world, because going out into the world was so painful for me for a long time. And I can't do that to him because like that's not, and it's also not right for my life.
Yeah, no, and codependency never works, right? Like what only thing it builds is resentment, and resentment undermines a relationship, right? So if I'm trying to make my wife, this was probably the biggest thing that I learned, let's say 20 to 25 years in to the relationship, was to be able to love myself enough and stand up for myself enough, in a sense, like to not worry about my okayness being her opinion of me. And to be able to put boundaries, actually, believe it or not, inside of our marriage about the way that I wanted to be, up to the point, sounds really bad, but up to the point that I was willing to lose the marriage.
Yeah.
If I couldn't live my life in the way that's healthy for me as well.
I mean, that doesn't sound bad. That honestly, like you have to, it's the line from Sex and the City.
Only way.
I love you, but I love me more.
That's right. And it's the only way you can.
A good marriage, you love yourself the most. That's a good marriage.
That's the example we need to give to our spouses, to our kids, right?
Yes. And our deal from the beginning has been like, we are here to help each other build our greatest dreams that didn't happen for us on the East Coast. And so far, our record is pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In 7 years, look at what we've built. There's a lot of dreams that had died on the East Coast that we have resurrected here and successfully built here. And the company, and my husband is founder and CEO, is one of them. He's, building an incredible company. And we really went from 0 to 1 or 0 to 3, I guess, together. And now we've hit a point where, it's time for me to go focus on my own projects. The company's in a great spot. So, everything evolves and you go on this journey together. But when you have been traumatized and you fall in love, there's going to be more work. It's harder. It just is. It's not fair. It's not fair at all that it's harder because you've already been through trauma. And then you've put yourself out there to find love, which is hard anyway. But when you're traumatized, it's even harder. So none of this is fair. I want to tell people, like, I'm with you. None of this is fair, but it is. And to me, not having the love was always worse than going through whatever it took to get to the love. And I was so clear on that. I was so clear on my why. I was so clear on, like, what is the game that I'm playing and what is winning for me, because I had gone to zero.
Yeah.
And I didn't go after career first. I went after marriage and children first, because that was more important to me.
Right. But I think that's so important. I think that's so important, though, for, to recognize what is the most important and to go for that, and to recognize, too, that it's going to come with pain. Nobody exits without pain. But to not, I put it this way. I usually talk about this with adventure, but it's true for relationships as well. To not live for fear of dying, to not love for fear of losing, is to not live at all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to come with pain. Like, I think my wife and I talk about this, right? We have this great relationship, and we reflect on death a fair amount because it's coming, right? And we see it in our all the people around us, and it's a great way of bringing presence into life. And, one of us is going to get to live, maybe it's 30 years from now or 40 years from now. So we might be married 70 years.
Wow. That's
and
amazing.
One of us is going to get to live without the other. And that's going to suck. I mean, it is going to be brutal. Would I trade that? Would I love any less right now because I know that's coming? Absolutely not. Right?
Also, when it does come, you don't know what it's going to look like yet. You just
I don't. That's true. But to say, well, I don't want to get hurt again. Right? I got hurt in my relationship past. I don't want to get hurt again, so I'm just going to shut down. Then you're already dying.
Well, I don't want to get hurt again. That's the hardest thing, is when you're in that space of, I just can't take any more pain. And I do want to say something that has really helped me is high performance athletes. Mike Tyson talking about, okay, how did Mike Tyson become Mike Tyson? Well, he got up every day and he took punches in the face for years with nobody knowing who he was, from a horrible childhood on the streets with an alcoholic, she might have been a drug addict mother. He got up every day and he took punches in the face with no guarantee of an outcome. He just got up every day for years and took punches in the face. Well, that was
and he
very
even said
inspiring.
You have to learn to love to take the punches in the face.
I don't love taking the punches in the face, but I get up and I take them.
He said it's.
I don't love the punches. I love the results from the punches.
Right.
I don't love the punches.
Better, like,
I don't like getting. I'm never gonna like getting punched in the face. I love the results that I get.
Right.
And the why for me is stronger. I recently did an interview with David Meltzer, who I admire a lot, and he said to me something that really resonated. He said, "Your purpose is greater than your pain." And my purpose is sometimes, here, look, I'm not going to make myself so noble. My purpose has occasionally been revenge. My purpose has occasionally been, I'm going to show those people that left me for dead. I'm going to show the people that tried to make money off of my daughter's death. That actually happened. I'm going to show the people, like, sometimes that was enough. It's not the ultimate reason why I do anything.
Yeah, but if it gets you moving in the right direction, it's okay.
Gets you going. If it gets
anything can be used for anything, good or bad.
Exactly. And if it gets you to take that punch in the face today, when like nothing else was going to get you to take it, so be it. Like, you don't have to have perfect, pure motivations all the time. It's better to not have, any illegal motivations or unethical, but like.
But even those can be used for good if they're.
Yeah, you use it for good. You don't have to go through with it.
Yeah, that's right.
And also knowing yourself down to your core. I just happen to be a person that is very motivated by rebellion and very motivated by, I'll show you. You want to get me to do something impossible? Make fun of me? Tell me I can't do it. Yeah. And then hold my beer while I go do it. And like, I'd say my life, in many ways, the results I produced is a direct result of that deep personality trait. And that deep personality trait has not gone away with all of the trauma. Like with all the
changes that you've been through.
I am not some like Zen, like, whoa, like, no. I do more trauma healing than anyone. And I can be grumpier than ever because like the more trauma healing you do, the more problems you're able to see and sort of handle. And it's not like it makes you this happy all the time Zen person. Not at all.
But that's a myth. Right? That's a myth. That the work is done and that you're going to be Zen happy all the time is a myth, right? The whether our emotions are like the weather. They're going to change.
Well, and the circumstances. I'm now on a journey that I've always wanted to be on. It's harder than I ever thought it would be. I had 2 babies under 2 and a new marriage to someone of a different ethnicity right after a war broke out between our people. And we had a brand new startup. Like, I was like, as hard as those years of 2014 to 2000 and I guess to 2022 were, 2022 was harder. It was by far one of the hardest years of my life. Because I had everything I wanted. And then I was like, oh my God.
All at once.
All at once. And so it's not like you go on this, spiritual journey and then you come out the other end and everything's, no, you get what you want and then you summit one Everest and then there's another Everest to climb.
That's right.
And you're either up for that or you're not. And the Everests get easier and you get more people to help you get up the Everest. Like every time I do this, I get more help. I'm like, okay, here's the team that I'm going to need.
If you get some wisdom, you also get to see that it's about the climb, not about the peak. Right?
It's about the climb, but I like comfort and I can be lazy. I want people to make the climb as easy as possible. And I want a team that's going to be there to make my hot chocolate at the end of each day,
my point is there. It's not that you shouldn't.
I don't want to do it alone anymore. I don't want to do it
enjoyable as possible, but that it's not about the arrival. It's not about suffering so that we can arrive somewhere because we don't know where the somewhere is. But just like you said earlier, we don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
So it's important, it's incumbent on us to make sure that we're enjoying the journey as much as possible. It's not about the result.
Right. But being in a marriage we love and being on that journey together and having amazing kids who make a laugh every day.
Exactly. And remembering to laugh and to eat great food and to dance and to celebrate, right? I mean,
yes, my kids love to dance. My husband's absolutely incredible cook. I make breakfast. That's what I do. But he's an incredible cook. We have joy, we have laughter, we have this beautiful life by the beach here in LA. And
that's beautiful. So I got a couple of last questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
Who is it that you are helping through transition now?
I don't know. It's a good question. Anybody who's listening, anybody who's reading, I mentioned, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker. So I write and I speak. I don't necessarily right now have a lot of one-on-one interaction with people going through trauma. People reach out to me sometimes. I mean, people within the stillbirth and infant loss community, it's a club that nobody wants to be in.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have deep, anybody who goes through this, I have unbelievable respect for. You are one of the strongest people in our society, whether you ever get credit for it or not. And I go out there and speak about it and present the picture of a strong woman who went through it so that the world can see you're not permanently broken. You're not permanently damaged. You're not toss her away. She's damaged goods. No, don't you treat women who go through this like that. I looked for anyone in the annals of history that had gone through a loss like this and had truly come out of it and talked about it. Oprah had a stillborn child. It was a horrific scenario. She was a child herself.
Yeah, 15
He has
or 16.
literally never, she was younger than that, literally never spoken about it. Elon Musk's first child died of SIDS. I think he was 10 days old. I don't think look, I'm not trying to disrespect fathers. It's not the same experience. It's just
for
not.
sure. For sure. I mean, the baby is part of
Keanu
you
Reeves
for
had
the
a
9
stillborn
months.
child. Prince had a stillborn child. None of them can really talk about it. And certainly none of them have publicly kind of guided you through the experience. So there was nobody, absolutely nobody. So I'm like, all right, I guess it's me.
Yeah. And there you go. Now, good for you for stepping into that very difficult and scary space.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it sucks because you've got the whole media industry. I pitched my book to an agent out here in LA, and it was a man. And not that men can't understand this story, but the first thing he said is like, "Aren't you worried people are going to think you made it up?" I was like, "I keep receipts, my friend. Like, seriously, you want to see the death certificate?" So this industry is what it is.
I can't believe that somebody would say that even.
Well, no, that's the publishing and entertainment industry. It's full of liars and charlatans.
Yeah. Crazy.
Somebody tried to
Crazy.
steal the story of my daughter's death and use it to sell their book. I mean, it's like, this is what it is right now. And they're all afraid of AI, which they should be.
For sure.
I have to put my armor on in order to go back out into this industry, but I do, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And the more successes I have, and the more, like notches on the wall that I get, the less painful and hard that it is. It's at this point, I get up and I take the punches in the face. I'm used to it. Doesn't bother me.
Keep going.
I'm used to it. If Mike Tyson can do it, so can I.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So if there's one tool that you would give our listeners, they're going through a really dark time right now, and it's something they could push the pause button on the podcast and implement right now. Something simple, one thing that they can do right now. What would that be?
Feel your own pain, as horrible and awful as it is. Don't run from it. Don't try and hide it. Don't try and suppress it. And don't try and, happy, joy it away. You have to be able to sit and feel your own pain. And as soon as you allow it and don't fight it, it will dissipate. It goes away when you stop fighting. And for lack of a better word, I don't love the word surrender. It feels like a weak word. I am not a surrenderer. You could probably get that from me by now. But you have to surrender and let yourself be in pain, in confusion, in fear, in doubt, in the nasty, ugly, messy emotions that our society doesn't like. And that we have created multi-billion-dollar tools to keep people out of, you can always, dopamine hits on Instagram, or go play some game or watch some video.
The whole tech industry.
The entire tech industry.
But a big chunk of it is just on that, right?
Put yourself first. Put yourself before Instagram. Put yourself before Facebook. You matter more.
But have the courage to feel your feelings, to feel the pain, to not avoid it.
There's no getting around. There's no going under. There's no going around. There's only going through. And I promise you this, as soon as you surrender and allow yourself to feel all this nastiness, it goes away and it doesn't come back. Now, there'll be another wave tomorrow. It's like the ocean. Yeah. There's going to be another wave. But in that moment, it will dissipate. It will go away.
Yeah.
I promise you. And if you don't do that, there is no possibility for transcendence. That is where the transcendence lies. I wish that there was some other hack or tool, but there isn't.
Yeah, would be nice, but there isn't. And I can definitely vouch for that.
Yeah. I would take fewer punches in the face, but
Yeah. So last question, Melissa, where can people find out more about you? Where can they connect with you?
Well, right now, my book is in process. I'm doing a lot of speaking. I'm doing, obviously, podcasts, talking to amazing people like you. You can find me on my website, melissasaleh.com. That's SALEH. You can find me on LinkedIn, find me on Instagram. For now, those are the places to reach me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being willing to have such an open conversation and share your wisdom. After a very, very difficult process, and congratulations on the wonderful life that you built. But I really appreciate you being with us here today and having such a vulnerable and meaningful conversation. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Art. And I appreciate your advice and your wisdom as well. It is most appreciated. Thank you. And thank you for the work you do.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.